so we're going to get going. So it is now November, right? Okay. We promised you a lighthearted talk for this month, but it all came crashing down. He's right there. No, he's cool. He's going He's okay, physically fine. He's in the room, and we're going to try to get him to speak again sometime next year. So we'll all be excited for when that happens. So we're going to make that happen, right? Cool, absolutely. All right. So we're going to have a deep, heavy, statistical, nerdy talk today then. All right? So anyone here is expecting cute, fuzzy monsters? It's not going to happen. We're going to get a different type of monster, a Bayesian monster. That's the stuff of nightmares. All right, so first things first, though. Jobs. Is anybody hiring this month? Anybody hiring? No. Okay. Is anyone firing? Yeah, it seems like everyone is, right? Okay, well, in case anyone who is watching virtually is hiring, you can go to the nyhackr Slack. If you want to find that, you go to nyhackr.org and click on the Slack hashtag, and then you could go to the job postings channel and post your job. I think a job was posted there fairly recently, and over the past 15 years, we've gotten numerous people jobs at this meetup asking this question. Used to have a lot more people hiring, but hopefully that will pick up again soon. So if you want a job, check out the job postings channel. If you want to hire someone, post it in the job postings channel. All right, second order of business. The pizza today is from Cello's Pizza. So everyone is in the room. Get out your phone. Go to bit.ly/pizzapoll and rank it on the 5-point scale and let us know how it is. I see a bunch of people eating but not taking out their phones. I will start calling you out. George, all right. You weren't eating, but I saw you sitting there without your phone. Everyone here, great, great, great. And if you're watching from home, go in the chat and let us know what you're eating. Food is a big part of this meetup. Not food. Pizza is a big part of this meetup. But if you made poor life choices and you don't have pizza, let us know what you're eating. If you want to chat, there are multiple ways to chat. You could chat right in the YouTube live stream which you're watching, or you could chat in the nyhackr Slack at the monthly meetup chat channel. So go there or go on YouTube and tell us what you're eating. Or if you have questions from the speaker and you're watching virtually later on, you can go in there and we will compile the questions asked virtually and we will ask them intermingled with the in-person questions. While everyone is voting, I will give a big thank you to NYU Prism and George for making this happen every month. So everyone, big round of applause for George and NYU Prism. So we have a big thank you to him for both enabling the space and enabling the projector and the screen. That comes from George. Well, he gets a special shout out for that. Last month, we had the R in Government Conference. The videos for that will be up, ready for everyone to view within the week. It'll be a nice Thanksgiving treat. When you're home avoiding your family, you can watch those videos instead. So we'll announce that when that comes out. Next month's meetup will be December 3rd, and it will be about population density of different cities. So that'll be a nice urban planner thing. Then in January, George will be giving a talk about some controversial statistical theory he has. It'll make all the causal inference people go nuts with these 3 cool tricks. Right? All right, but that'll be George speaking in January. Then in February, Eric will be hopefully giving that talk. And if not that talk, some other talk. You have another talk you'll have to give instead if you can't give that one. All right, cool, cool, cool. Then in March will be Vikram. Cool. Then in April, we're going to have a talk about, assuming we can confirm this with them, about mapping. They have a new thing called subway stories. And it's about mapping, people getting on and off the train, where they start, where they stop. Remember a few months ago we had an MTA person come talk. They have a model for where people get off. These people are using that data to make visualizations. So it's a very nice tie-in to our previous talk. All right, then after the talk today, we are going to go to Malthouse. George came up with this. He said it's a great place.
It's bad, it's Jared's fault.
There you go. But Nicole said she likes it, so we're going to trust her more than George, right? And we're going to go to Malthouse, which is located at, where is it located?
I think it's on Thompson.
Thompson, a little below the park. You all have Google Maps. Malthouse, find it. We're going to go there. Hopefully it'll be good. It's good to try a new place. So we'll do that. And anyone who's watching virtually in New York City, we've had people show up at the bar after the talk, so come by. Thompson and what?
Thompson and Bleecker.
Thompson and Bleecker. All right, folks, Thompson and Bleecker, that's where we're heading. All right. Oh, that's right by, Fiore's is gone. But it's right by Arturo's, which we've had for the meetup before.
Closer, it's closer.
Oh, closer than that. All right, cool, cool, cool. Oh, yeah, that's on Houston. Thank you for correcting. Thank you. All right, anyway, so we had a cancellation today, so we're not learning about Pixar. We want to have a big thank you for our fill-in speaker, who we literally filled in last night around 10:30 at night, I think we got him to fill in. So everyone, both thank him and just welcome him to the stage. Welcome, Daniel. Come on down. And a big round of applause, seriously. It was great.
I'm going to disappoint Jared. This talk is really lighthearted. It's not going to be technical. I figured it's a long day. It's, what day is it today? Tuesday? Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about turntables. On the left here, we have the Technics 1200 Mark IIs. And on the right, we have the M3D. And I'm going to tell you about my favorite model here. If you don't know, these were the workhorse turntables used in all clubs for many decades. They're awesome. But there was a major improvement that happened in '97. That little on and off switch right there. And the difference is really subtle. But on the left, the whole top turned. Right? So you can easily hit it and the whole top turned. But on the right, you had this little casing that went all the way to the top. So you actually had to be intentional about turning it. There were a couple other improvements here. The pitch fader is different, where there's a little depression in the middle on the Mark IIs, which made it, it's like a rounding error. If you get close to 0, it's going to just go to 0, which is not good for trying to mix. But this is really the thing. And so my favorite model is the Mark IIIs, the M3Ds, just because of usability. And that's probably not why you're here. All right, I'm going to talk to you about my favorite statistical model. Just to give you some background, I've worked on Stan for a long time. Stan's an open source probabilistic programming language. It's known for Bayesian inference, but you can use it for other things. It's open source, is used across industries. There are all these secondary packages that make it easier to use. rstan, rstan-arm, BRMS, PyStan, command-stan py. If you look at sort of the R thing, this, by the way, this talk was prepared as a backup to the NYR. So this is a bunch of R type of stuff here. I've been working with Stan for about 13 years. Did a lot of the community building, much like Jared has been doing here. Online meetups in New York City, given a lot of talks. Some of the different models that I've worked on with Stan, and you could ask me questions about any of this stuff and I'll be happy to answer them, or what I can. Quality control across different sites for diamond rating. There's price elasticity for consumer pricing. Mixed media modeling is pretty big. If you're into pharmacokinetics or pharmacodynamics, Stan is used a lot there. One of the things is that those types of models were the hardest for me to implement. Sorry, most effort to implement. I wouldn't say hardest, but it definitely took a lot of time to implement. So working with ordinary differential equations. Survival models, that was the hardest math. It took months of pencil and paper to do integrals so that I didn't have to put it into Stan. Actual neural nets using a brain epilepsy model. My current job is estimating and projection skills of sports players. Right now I'm working in the NBA, so that's what I do. And we'll talk about my favorite model. This work was not done alone. This was done while at Warner Music and with a team of great people. So these are the people that I worked with at the time. And what we were trying to do was estimate, for any track, a music track, estimate how many streams you would get for the track in the future. Some of the reasons that we care. The first is it drives revenue. The more streams you have, the more money you have. Great. The second thing that people were interested in was how can we affect the stream counts? Can we do anything to boost it? Can we, advertise a little more? So what we were trying to do was forecast and estimate these tracks into the future And what we're interested in is by what they call DSP, which is a digital service provider. That's Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, there are a bunch of them. And we were also interested in by country. Some of the things that people were interested in were, if it takes off in the US, is Europe going to follow later? If it takes off in Paris, in France, does it go to Belgium next? Where is it going? So let's take a guess. Can you guess where these songs are going to go based on the stream? So the stream counts are going vertical. Spotify is in blue. Apple Music is in green. And Amazon is in red. So if you take a look, this is an Afro beats type of song here. And it's going there. Jack Harlow First Class, if you're into like pop-ish hip hop stuff. That was released here, and it's going down. So take a second, in your mind, try to take a guess of where it's going to go. I'll show you what actually happened. Oh, yeah. I'll show you in a little bit. Oh, actually, it's right here. Okay, cool. So, yeah. If you look, you'll see this sort of pattern. It goes up, and it comes down. Pretty easy. Except for Mother, Mother, Hayloft 2. Right? And you'll see that it was going down, and then something happened, and you got a lift. Some other things to note are the y-axis here. Jack Harlow's in the 4 million at the top range. CK was at 300K, right? So we have completely different types of artists here that are represented in this data set. The forecasting model. So this model, like I said, is my favorite model here, is representing the streams of music or streams of stream counts as music envelopes. So how many of you play instruments and have seen something like this before? Okay. So, all right, I'll take a second to explain what's going on. If you imagine, this is the envelope of sound. Amplitude goes up, that's how loud a sound is, and as it comes back down, it gets quieter. If you play a note on a piano, you press it, that's what happens here. It's going to get louder, right? And then piano is kind of percussive, so it gets loud really fast. If you play a different instrument, it's going to get loud over time. So that happens here. And it gets to a maximum, and as you hold it, it's going to decay a little bit. It's going to decay a little bit naturally. And then as you hold it, it's going to sustain. And then at some point, you're going to let go of the key, and it's going to release. And this pattern happens differently with different musical instruments. You could do this with electronic instruments as well. So ASDR, attack, decay, sustain, release. For our forecasting model, what we were trying to do was estimate from the data, first of all, a delay. So between the time that you release the song, we're going to estimate the time before it starts ramping up. Why are we trying to estimate that? Part of the problem is there's incorrect data. It'll say that a song was released a week prior, 2 weeks prior to when it actually was released on the platforms. We're trying to estimate this maximum, the distance between 0 and the maximum in the number of streams. We want to know the sustain amplitude here, so how high it stays pretty flat. We also want to know the attack duration, right? So how long does it take to get to its peak? And then the decay duration, how long does it go from its peak back down to a place where it just kind of flatlines for a while? In our model, we ignore this release part because if you look back at the, if you look back at the data, most of these songs, if you look further down in time, especially a big pop song like First Class, you'll see that it just stays, people listen to it at about the same rate for a long time. So we can ignore this. So here's how the forecasting model does, right? So if we truncated the data at this dotted line, and so we didn't show the model, the model the data after that, it kind of estimates things like that. And how does it do that? It's building out this model for this attack, decay, and something that's not captured in the data, and this is why Mother Hayloft 2 is weird, is because Mother went on a global tour right here and made another release. So they got a bump because they did something, right? And just looking at the streams, absent of that context, you're going to miss all that. All right, so streams as music envelopes. Once again, we're estimating from the data the decay, which is not pictured, a max, a sustained amplitude, intact duration, decay duration. All right. The question is, why is this particular model my favorite? And we kind of have to look at the alternative here. So I could have described this as a compartmental model in epidemiology and try to explain this to a musician or a musician turned music executive, right? This resembles a SIR model. How many are familiar with this sort of model? Oh, cool. So we got a bunch of people in here that are familiar with this model, but not music envelopes, right? So within this community, I can talk about, you have a population of susceptible people. That's the population of people that listen to this type of music, right? And then you get the infectious, and they're going to start spreading out who listens to models. Oh, one thing I should mention is that if you look at the infectious curve, that sort of looks like what we were looking at, right? So the two other curves are sort of hidden from us, are latent. We could describe this as an ordinary differential equation, right? So it takes a little bit of math. And what we're trying to estimate here are two different rate variables that kind of describe, that'll give different shapes to this I curve. We're trying to estimate these population sizes. And we'll end up talking about derivatives and rates of change, right? That comes natural from these equations here. It's because of the way the math is. Another thing that comes naturally out of a model like this is half-lives, like when do you get to half of the population? And you're interested in sometimes steady states. So if you have a more complex version of this sort of model, you talk about steady state behavior. So the reason why this particular model is my favorite is because I was able to reframe the model into something that's intuitive to people in the music industry. It's easier to communicate for them, right? So I can talk about, if I talk to a musician about, here's the max amplitude, here's the max number of streams that I expect to get, here's the decay, here's the time it'll take for it to be steady. So I can communicate all that, and the switch in nomenclature to something that's very familiar to the musicians is and communicable was really the key. And so much like it's a little subtle change in usage, right? It's not that the model is any different. We could have done the same thing with the SIR model here, but by changing and reframing it, we get something that's really useful and communicate, useful for the purpose. I ran through those slides really fast, Jared. So first, I'll take questions.
Sure. Let me see these questions that were online.
Any questions from the crowd here? Go.
So, is there some view of the two models that they're essentially equivalent under the hood, or can be?
Yeah, they can be. So I've used this trick a couple of other times as well. So you change the quantity of interest from the natural parameters of the statistical model. So instead of thinking about this as beta and gamma and trying to estimate these and communicate beta and gamma to people that what does beta mean? What does gamma mean? When you start talking about what priors do you put on a beta, people that work in music aren't really going to be able to tell you anything about it. And you start framing that as, all right, this is Jack Harlow. What do you think the maximum number of streams you're going to get the first week? Is there some way you can bump that to 2x that? How long do you think they're going to be at the top of the charts for? What does that mean? When are they going to fall off the top of the charts? His last song did 10 weeks at the top of the charts, so we expect it to be 10 weeks or 12 or 8, right? And you can talk about that in those terms, but if you try talking about them in these terms, minus beta, these gammas, it's the same model, right? It's just.
Same or just
Well, you can
same basic shape of the curve?
you can impute the priors for the parameters by looking at it in a different frame of reference.
Is there a functional limit to how far in the future you can predict streams?
We're pretty bad. Well, two things. Streams for most songs are really consistent. Once they hit this like sustain, people will listen to it at that same rate. Things that have changed that are TikTok and what they call it. It's when they play the old songs on new shows, and then it picks up, and then it gets back on TikTok, Instagram, and then all of a sudden you had Kate Bush, Running Up the Hill, made it to #1 chart for the first time, and like that was the longest one. It was like 30-year gap since the release to being #1, right? Stuff like that, like good luck predicting that. I'd like to publish a song that 30 years later gets picked up and gets royalties for.
Hello, I've been enjoying your talk from behind the pillar. Hello.
Hey.
I like how you had the 4 plots and showed here's a situation where the model doesn't really capture this external forcing of tour, right? But for the general case of an attack of a decay, we can represent these models. One thing I was wondering though is what the model specification was. Is it like a piecewise linear spline? Is it like with tie points? Is it, like these different parameters you pointed out, the attack, the decay, and all this? Are those inputs to another model? Can you help us understand like what's the predictor and input variables?
Yeah, so those are great questions. It started out as a SIR model with the derivatives specified that way. And then we were having a lot of trouble with that model and fitting it. It was written in a different language. We won't talk about all the problems, but that was how it originally started. And we were actually having trouble specifying reasonable priors for these things because it depends on the size of the different populations, right? The priors are context driven in that sense. So at the end of the day, the thing that we actually fit for this work here, which has been expanded on since, was actually a linear model, a piecewise linear model.
Piecewise linear model.
Yeah.
I love that.
But
Wow.
it was done Bayesian, so if you look there, you actually do see like a bit of uncertainty there because we're not just optimizing it.
Oh yeah.
And
It probably close to the tie points, right? Where
Yeah.
sort of residuals flare out.
that's right. So it has this bit of like a change point type of property to it as well because we were estimating the time to when these things happen. So those are variable in time. The other thing was it was hierarchical. So we were assuming that all 3 of these curves, we actually had like a dozen DSPs stacked together, but we assumed that they were moving together in some fashion across different countries. It turns out that isn't quite true. If you start looking into user behavior, Spotify users are very different than Apple users, and both of those are very different than people in France on Deezer. And those were just some of the major ones. And we were seeing things like house music absolutely pop off in Europe in Deezer, and it wouldn't. Maybe, but it wasn't popping off here, and it turned out it was in like was it BeatSource or some other DSP that was like didn't have streams otherwise. Like
So DSPs are sort of like almost an independent modifier. You gotta treat them separately in the specification.
yeah, so I mean this work, right? Every time you work on a model like this, all these questions are good. We were thinking about a lot of these. It's like, where can we do better, right? We have this hierarchical model tying these different DSPs together in a certain way, assuming that they should all function similarly. But then no, they don't. So we were battling that. There was what other things? Some of the other things that we were battling was the reason why we had to estimate the decay in there was because I think the most egregious one was Lizzo, About Damn Time, was the metadata had the track released 2 years prior to the actual release date. And if you're thinking like you're working inside Warner Music, this is your artist, don't you know the actual date you like handed this over to Apple? Like, it turns out that that's a very hard problem for unknown reasons to me. And some of the other things were each of these songs. So we think of these as songs. We think of this as a recording, and you might think that one recording gets blasted out to everywhere. It turns out if you look under the hood, this one recording might have 12 different equivalent of ISBNs, like SKUs. So why does it do that? Every time it's on a release, it gets another number. So if it's on an album cut, if it's on a this cut, it's this release, this compilation, it gets another number attached to it. It turns out that people are very careful about how they spell things and want features and whether or not they're listed as a artist. So something titled with featuring someone else is different than a song that says that with a featured artist is different than, all sorts of other things. Sometimes the publishers are in there. Sometimes the writers get credit in the actual song. So each of those are different. And it turns out that it was actually very difficult for us to find a master list of which recording had how many like SKU numbers attached to it. And so we had to do this like an inverse NLP problem instead of sitting on the data. NLP is, it's awesome, but it's hard when you have to, when you assume that this stuff is known, yeah, that's when it gets you. Like we didn't discover some of these problems until months in, which is, the only reason we knew that is because we were looking at a very well-known track and then realized we were missing Spotify streams for a couple months.
What was the NLP problem again?
If you see CK Emiliana, how many different ways is that spelled?
Oh.
How many hyphenations? How many different compilations does it get on? Turns out people play games like chop the song by a couple seconds so it fits on Apple to get onto their top playlists, like because there's a limit. So there are lots and lots and lots of games to play, and just looking at the data, we're not in control of that.
Did you all have breakdowns of first-time listeners versus repeat listeners?
Yeah, some of the challenge was we were dealing, right at the time was the shift over from like having a lot of high fidelity cookie data to less fidelity, so everything was aggregated. But we did have a lot of that. This model didn't incorporate a lot of that. I'm hoping that they've done more since.
How did you decide when it switched ethics?
Well, what?
When it switched from ascent, decay, and
We were estimating that. So that was one of the parameters that we were estimating in the model. When we were starting out with the SIR model, it naturally comes out of the beta and the gamma. So the combination of that will determine where the peak is. But once we change it up, we can actually specify where that is and put priors on it.
Was it one model for everything, or did you have a model for the change points and a model for each section individually?
It was one model for everything, which was actually really cool.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the slide that had all the tracks on them? Yeah. Would you say that with Mother, was it like another ADSR happening right at the point of, is that the thinking along which you would drive it further?
Yeah, so back to communication to music executives and people that know music. The thing that we were going with this model was if you look at something like this, if you look at MIDI instruments, you can press a key, hold it down and press a key again, and it'll just stack on. And we were thinking the first thing we were going to do was do additive. A second thing happens, it's sustaining, and then you add a second peak, so you just add it to that. There are non-linear ways to think about that as well, but the first step is linear. So that was one of the things that we're thinking when we're talking to people. It's like, for example, like they were pushing, there was a lot of work around Ed Sheeran with a lot of remixes for a particular song. And the question was, if I do a remix and release it on this date, and then wait a week and release it on a second date, and then wait a week and release it on a third date, now you have 3 events. Is it better to do 1 event, or is it better to do 3? Does that add to the first song, or does it just kind of peter out? So that was sort of the thinking behind that.
I like a lot the analogy you made between audio signal and your forecasting model. I was curious to know how important it is when you speak to your music executives or like business stakeholders that they understand your forecasting model, or can you just like, okay, this is the best forecast, this is the best we've come up with. How does this discussion happen?
That's a great question. And I'll say for the music industry in particular, the actual methods mattered less than, say, the pharma industry. So at the pharma level, the stakeholders were PhD biostatisticians that we're talking to that understood their methods and wanted to know, the questions he was asking in the corner about like, hey, about like what are these different, is it a spline-based method? Is it, what do you have going on in the model? Can you explain it to me? Here for the music industry, most of the people that make it to the top and are decision makers they're there because they love music at some point. Even though it may not always seem that way, but at some point people love music and that's how they got into it. But they're not all statisticians, they're not all machine learning people. They want to know how Jack Harlow was going to do. Why? Because they wanted to know whether or not they should push more for Jack Harlow or Dua Lipa, right? They have a budget problem. They don't care how these numbers came out, which is why it goes back to most of the things in the model, we kind of hid away from people at that point. It's there, right? We're not hiding it for the purpose of hiding it. We're hiding it for the purpose of us talking to the stakeholders on their terms. And that's what this model gave to us. We tried talking to them about, these populations that didn't exist, and they kind of, they don't want to hear that. Not in a quick meeting. But yeah, in general, I think it depends. You have to read the room.
Quick question. How far in the long time horizon do you have to do these forecasts? Next month, a couple of months, a quarter out? For music, if I remember correctly, it was
they had 3 different time horizons that they were looking at. One was a weekly time horizon. They want to be on the charts. To be on the charts, you're looking 1 week ahead. The second is, I think, about 2 months out, because then you get, if I remember right, it's like the amount of revenue you get in the first 2 months is really most of the revenue that most artists will get. So that's what they were concerned with, and whether or not they can increase that value. And then third was like, do you have a back catalog that's worth anything? So can you have rights on this? And like people were thinking about, at that point, people were thinking about buying and selling rights to music. So.
Do you look like characteristics of the song?
There was another team working directly on the characteristics of the song, listening to, or looking at the lyrics, trying to see if the content made a difference. They were breaking down like beats per minute, feel, vibes, whatever you want to call it. They were trying to group similar songs together to see if that had an effect. But I worked on, a different team that was just looking at the streams themselves. And yeah, every like 10th song would have some weird blip like this. So if you end up on a random Spotify playlist and you're only getting, like, let's say you're only getting 1,000 streams a week, that might boost you up to like 20,000 1 week, and then you go back down to 1,000. But for someone like Jack Harlow, that doesn't make any difference. But for someone with very few streams, you get random blips here and there.
At what point were you typically making these predictions? Were they ever made pre-release based on the artist's performance on prior material?
Yeah, the question was, when do you make the projections? And yeah, they were done pre-release. A lot of it was asking pre-release. A lot of the questions that were sort of really hard for us to get to by the time we wrapped up the project was like how you have 2 different songs that an artist wants to release. How high are they going to be in the maximum number of streams for the first week? And then on top of that, how do you keep an artist at their peak for many weeks at a time? Is that through advertising? And it's like, it's really hard to tell. What we didn't have were marketing numbers attached to these, which made it really hard to tell what interventions people were doing. Like, is it natural? Is it spreading because people like the music? Is it spreading because Spotify put it on the top, like, radar, whatever playlist that is? So yeah, anyway, there was a lot of that.
Would you say the maximum was the most difficult of the ADSR to predict, or the attack itself?
I think the decay part. So the reason why the maximum wasn't that hard was like you could be off by 2x or half, and it's not going to matter in the long scheme of things, right? It matters whether or not you're going to make it to the charts. If you don't have that big boom, you don't get to top 40s ever. But the amount of time that you stay relatively strong, there are lots of different behaviors that drive that. For a song with low tracks, we've seen like a couple accounts that have streamed it like as many times as humanly possible, which probably indicates not a human. But at the bigger artists, that doesn't make a difference. So it's like people are consuming it stream at a time, like stream 10 times a day. Yeah. So that's it. Like, how do you keep something relevant is a very hard question to ask. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. Remixes is definitely one. Yep. Was there a hand this side?
I think I was going to ask kind of a similar question. Just like, after this project, were there any general, like, insights one could, like, your stakeholders could take away from kind of thinking about how do you increase the amplitude
There wasn't, and the reason I'm saying that there were lots of little takeaways when you subset things into different bins, but it turns out dealing with stakeholders is often difficult when they're asking questions that are too broad, and when you don't have a lot of time with them, it makes it even more difficult to try to give them a truthful answer, because they'll be asking stuff like, for all the artists in this genre, what's going to happen? It's like, is that the?
It's much, yeah, no. It would make sense. It's much easier to answer about maybe a more specific artist or a specific song.
So some of the really cool questions that we dug into were, there's this like sub-genre that someone was really interested in as an A&R.
Right.
And so an A&R is someone that scouts out new artists and they were looking at this subgenre. And they were trying to figure out whether or not that had a positive trend. Because if they did, they would sign more artists to that genre and try to make that genre bigger. If the genre gets bigger, their back catalog gets worth more, like everyone in that little subfield. Those were cool questions to ask, and we could start seeing a trend of, they're getting a little more popular. But yeah, a lot of the questions that they were asking were about these pop stars, Dua Lipa, Lizzo's, Jack Harlow's of the world, who are massive. And so when you're talking, like, it was actually pretty easy to say, like, Jack Harlow did 4 million streams on, was that Spotify, right, that first week. If you looked at his last release, it was about 4 million. And I could tell you that the next release he's going to do is going to be about 4 million. I'm good there. It's really like, they want to know, how's the album going to do? And it's like, I don't know. People are releasing music piece at a time. This song is really popular. The 12th cut on that album, who's listening to the whole album these days? Like, I do. But.
I don't recognize these artists at all. I'm completely losing track now.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah, I was excited to work with Warner Music because I've been a DJ for more than half my life, and just kind of knowing about music's really cool. But then digging into it, it gets really messy, especially when it came to like, you'd think that you'd have metadata, control of your own metadata, and they just don't. And it's wild.
Too busy with payola.
Payola's gone. Supposedly.
Is there an immediate positive or negative with getting the forecast a little bit off?
Oh yeah, so what they were trying to do was actually, if you think about it as your record label, you have a number of artists, two things you can do. You can stagger releases, right? So instead of everyone competing for the same user base, the question is whether or not releasing two things at the same time is better for you or worse, first of all. It could be better. People might listen to more of your music in aggregate. But the second thing is, where does the marketing budget go? If you got someone with 4 million streams and you could boost that to 5 million streams, that's a lot better than someone with 10,000 streams and boosting them to 12,000 streams, right? And so they had that question. That was top of mind for them.
Were you able to do anything to share data, like keep track of how much these songs are shared versus others? Is that
Yeah, we didn't get to that though at this point. We were interested in so many things, but you know.
What was the business primarily interested in here? They just wanted to detail like what it would persist at after the heat and all that?
The honest answer to that was at the major record label, they're interested in the very first few weeks. They want to know the peak, and the first few weeks that they're going to be There's a very big difference between not charting and charting.
Yeah.
So if you can chart, you win. If you don't chart, you're in a secondary class of music. So at the record label, not for the musician. The musician wants to release good music and be heard. But if you're the record label, there's a lot of things that happen once you get to that level. So the question is always like, if you're close, how do you get there?
Within your model, were you able to predict
We were using things like artist, past releases, similarity in terms of genre and different things. So we were doing okay. But
Interesting. So like maybe like by their number of followers and the genre they're in,
we were plugging that stuff
past
into.
performance.
Yeah, we were trying to scrape like Twitter followers, Insta followers. The thing that we didn't have at that time, because it was too early, was TikTok. Like we didn't have control. We didn't have a lot of TikTok data, but TikTok was blowing up at the time. So that would have been really interesting to follow. Like some of these drivers of like these other tracks that you would see that just are flat and then pop up all of a sudden. A lot of that was coming from TikTok, and if we were tracking TikTok, we would have known. But we just looking at the DSPs themselves, we didn't have an indication of that.
That's everything I got from online. There's a few questions online, but it might just be more jokes. So you can go check it out from some of them.
Yeah.
Like how many songs are time coded at the Unix epoch? Yeah. So you can deal with snarkiness later.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We still have a little bit of time. Paul.
Is there any like motivation to clean up the metadata?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. I was motivated.
Yeah, I mean, but in terms of like, do they see that as like a business opportunity, and would they work with, let's say, the DSPs to make that better, or is there's some business reason that the metadata sucks?
I think there's always a business reason metadata sucks, which is probably the business doesn't value enough. I think the truth is that the record industry is a very old industry, relatively. Everything was built around physical sales. So the inventory system, the numbering of these things, it was all based on physical counting of like I ship a crate of records to a record store, and after a month, none of them came back. We assume they're sold. Yeah, and then we'll send them some more. And the way the music industry was set up is like Warner Records has a bunch of sub-labels under it, and they all operate their own P&L, as far as I could tell. And that meant they had their own marketing department. That meant that there were data scientists working, imagine like hundreds of data scientists working off of the same data and learning to collect it and process it in different ways. So even if we asked 2 sets of people or 3 sets of people to look at the same thing and ask about the results of this thing, we get wildly different forecasts just because we're counting things differently. So this project was done under the record, the head record label, the central place. But yeah, the metadata cleanup is, I think, there are just too many cooks in the kitchen, and it's hard to fix that. I don't know.
Do the DSPs have better metadata? I mean,
The DSPs have metadata. They know what they have.
but they're motivated. I mean, they're using it to like assume you to push stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can get someone from Spotify out here to talk about the internals, but yeah, I'm sure it's very similar. My guess is that they just need to count, and for compliance reasons, count how many times something was streamed so that they can send royalties back. and they're not concerned with, who they pay is, like, the individual artist is not on them. They pay the record label, and let the record label, it just gets passed down.
SoundScan and Arbitron or whatever it is, I feel like they took care of a lot of these problems back in the 90s, so
Yeah,
they probably have like some cleaner data, which they can pay for.
but it's like everything else. If you stop cleaning your data, it gets messy real quick.
Yeah.
So clean your data, everyone.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If there are any last questions? Then if there's no other questions, did you see that Lego released a turntable?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so it's perfect for you. It's a little tiny Lego turntable about this big. It looks a lot bigger in the picture, but it's perfect for him. You need to get that. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you for this last talk.
Connect with me if you want. I'm around. I'm in New York.
He just had a baby 3 months ago, though, so he's going to go fall over. Okay. With that, again, you filled in as of like last night, so thank you for pulling this together. I know you had this ready for the NYR conference, but always great to have you. Always great to have you, but also thank you very much for doing this. Dan's been a member of this community for 15 years? Probably. Let's go 15-ish, right, towards near the beginning. So awesome. Then I guess we will go to the bar. Before we go to the bar, remember, thank you to NYU, of course, for making this happen. And next month, December 3rd, we'll get that announced tomorrow, hopefully. It'll be, right, George, we can have it announced tomorrow, you think? Yes. We'll have a room, so we'll get that announced tomorrow. Or Thursday, you said you could.
Probably by tomorrow.
Probably by tomorrow, but maybe Thursday we'll get that announced. And that'll be December 3rd, somewhere here at NYU campus, likely this building, maybe even this room, we'll see. And then we'll announce January, February, March, and April as we go. We have things lined up, but we'll get there. The R and government videos will be up online by Thanksgiving, so you can enjoy those when you're eating too much. We're going to pack up here, and we're going to go over to Malt House and have a post-meetup beverage to talk more. To have a what?
A malt.
A malt, yes. You get all have malt balls, right? So enjoy that. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you next month.